first up, so let me know if I did this wrong. So, my name is Gregory Sheehan, spelled, you need last name spelled and first?
Just last.
Sheehan, S-H-E-E-H-A-N. I'm the director of the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources. Our comments today. The state of Utah supports the delisting of the gray wolf, Canis lupus, in the contiguous United States. Once wolves are delisted throughout Utah, its wolf management plan will fully take effect and the species will be managed by the state as it has managed other large predators such as the cougar and bear. We agree that the gray wolf and its constituent subspecies, excluding the Mexican wolf, are not in danger of extinction throughout all or a significant portion of their respective ranges and are not likely to become so in the foreseeable future. The Mexican wolf subspecies listing is, however, procedurally flawed because the service has failed to articulate the reasons for and involve the public in its decision to abandon the DPS listing. The choice to list it as a subspecies as opposed to a DPS is a discretionary act subject to NEPA review. The proposed endangered subspecies listing protects a wolf anywhere found in the United States. This prevents states outside the Mexican wolf's historic range and the federal government from managing or controlling dispersing wolves. Mexican wolves that disperse into Utah and Colorado will interbreed with northern wolf subspecies and their progeny will not contribute to Mexican wolf recovery. Dispersal and interdegradation of these hybridized wolves to core Mexican wolf populations in Arizona and New Mexico will swamp the unique genetic features of the subspecies and jeopardize its recovery. Additionally, the proposed 10J area should be extended south to include all Mexican wolf habitat within Mexico. By including Mexico in the experimental population, all Mexican wolves found outside the 10J area will presumptively originate from an experimental population. This presumption will eliminate the inherent uncertainty and inextricable debate in classifying the origin of the Mexican wolf for purposes of capture and return. Additionally, we as the state of Utah take the position that the Mexican wolf never historically inhabited Utah or Colorado and should not be introduced there at any future time as the expansion occurs.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is James Uguala. I am a member of the Havasupai tribe from the northern Arizona in the Grand Canyon. I am also representing the essence of the ceremonialists and traditional people within the indigenous tribes throughout the Southwest. Part of our responsibilities within our journeys is to be able to respect and honor all those that are a part of the living within creation. The four leggeds are considered to be a very powerful part of the whole. It is also important for you and all those that are listening to remember that the teachings within the indigenous lands was that we are a part of their land. We've been given the privilege to be on the areas that they are now inhabiting, but as a result, our stories from time beginning says that we were also in close relationships, and we tell of stories where we, as the two-leggeds, also were shapeshifters into many of the four-leggeds, wing-leggeds, and all that is of the living. It is important for us to be able to be in responsibility of all that is of creation within Turtle Island. And when situations of this sort arises and it brings endangerment to our brothers, our sisters, the four-leggeds, it is important for the medicine groupings to be able to make voice to say that this is a part of responsibility for all that is inhabiting Turtle Island, which is the United States, and to be able to give us and all that is of walk and talk in these times to be able to work harmoniously. There is a tribal and spiritual laws that do govern the well-being of the indigenous people.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
the record, I'm Jim, J-I-M, Detro, D-E-T-R-O, Commissioner of Monroe County in the state of Washington. When I was first elected and engaged in the Wolf War in the West, we challenged the ESA on the basis of the verbiage that stated to reintroduce a species that had to be an indigenous species to the area. Indigenous, I'm sorry. Our wolf was an 85-pound American gray wolf. That wolf, the wolf that was shoved down our throats, was a 185-pound Mexican McKenzie Valley Arctic gray wolf. Our objection was met with the rhetoric, the wolf is wolf is wolf is a wolf. On that note, I challenge you to be consistent. You cannot now break out a subspecies, the Mexican gray wolf, and give them a special protection. The wolf is wolf is a wolf. With that, I remind you of the spotted owl. 30 years after the listing of the spotted owl, wanton destruction of a multi-billion-dollar timber industry destroyed custom, culture, and economic stability of communities, families, small businesses, and caused bankruptcies and divorces, all in the name of now. Now we see that junk science that led to the listing has come home to roost, no pun intended. 30 years later, the spotted owl is still in decline by 40%. Now the so-called experts say that the fault is in the barred owl. And yet not one agency, not one tree hugger, not one ditch bird watcher is coming forward to say we were wrong. Now to my county, the largest in the state, 9th largest in the nation. My county is bordered on the north by Canada, bisected by Highway 97, and the Colville Indian Reservation occupies the southeastern quarter of the county. So if wolf crosses the line recognized only by man in BC where there are 10,000 wolves, there's a $350 bounty on them. Come back across the line to Highway 97. On one side he's delisted, on the other side he's listed. Colville Indian Reservation that occupies the southern eastern quarter of Goughnour County, there are 9 kill permits. Wolves migrate. Oh, I'm sorry. Wolves migrate.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Next speaker, please.
Good evening, and thank you very much for holding this hearing. I'm Sylvia Allen, A-L-L-E-N, Navajo County Supervisor. Recently, Supreme Court Justice Roberts said this quote, "The federal government has expanded dramatically over the past 2 centuries, but it still must show that a constitutional grant of power authorizes each of its actions. The same does not apply to states because the Constitution is not the source of their power. State governments do not need constitutional authorization to act. Our cases refer to this general power of governing possessed by the states but not by the federal government as the police powers. The framers thus ensured that powers, which in the ordinary course of affairs concern the lives, liberties, and properties of the people, were held by governments more local and more accountable than a distant federal bureaucracy. So I feel this responsibility as elected official to protect the health, safety, and welfare of my citizens. The 10J rule governing the management of Mexican wolves in Arizona and New Mexico should recognize this constitutional police powers of the states to protect the health, welfare, and safety of its citizens. And I appreciate the language right now that's in the proposed 10J rule. It just needs to be stronger, I feel. Specific language allowing citizens, landowners, permittees, or county law enforcement to take or injure a wolf if the wolf is engaged in killing, wounding, biting, chasing, stalking, threatening, or harassing humans, pets, livestock on private land, their livestock on public lands or reservation lands. Wolves showing signs of fearless behavior are becoming desensitized to human encounters, must be removed permanently. I feel that when people realize that they have these rights to protect themselves and their property, that a lot of this contention of having the wolves out there will leave. And also, Navajo County feels strongly that the 10J rule must disclose full social, culture, and economic costs and impacts on rural residents and local governments. Potential impacts include the loss of tax revenue and the increased costs due to the presence of introduced wolves. Navajo County recently...
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Kimberly, K-I-M-B-E-R-L-E-E, Mulhern, M-U-L-H-E-R-N. I'm a consultant to Cochise County, Arizona, and I've come to this public hearing to read into the record a statement regarding the gray wolf proposed rules on behalf of Cochise County, Arizona. Cochise County strongly supports the proposed rule to remove the gray wolf from the list of endangered and threatened species. In addition, Cochise County supports the delisting of all wolves, including all subspecies, distinct population segments, and other taxonomic or regulatory definitions. We support state game and fish department management of the Mexican wolf. The county has strong opposition to maintaining protections for the Mexican wolf by listing it as endangered and to the proposed revisions to the non-essential experimental population of the Mexican wolf. Due to its location along the U.S.-Mexico border, Cochise County is uniquely affected by the proposed revision to the non-essential experimental population of the Mexican wolf because of the proximity to wolves being introduced in Mexico, and would be affected by efforts in the nearby Blue Range as well. The proposed revision threatens our rural customs, culture, and the continued decline of our native wildlife in southern Arizona. Elk are not present in Cochise County. The number of deer, especially mule deer, has been decreasing in recent years. In addition, pronghorn antelope herd populations are fragile. Other predators are moving into urban areas of the county in search of food. Cochise County does not have the prey base to support another predator such as the Mexican wolf. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service needs to return to the basic premises of the Endangered Species Act, including use of the best available commercial and scientific information. Though the public may mean well, many comments of proponents of the wolves are based on emotion. It is the job of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to use the best available science, not emotion. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Gary Watson, Supervisor from Mohave County. In August of 2013, I attended the meeting in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and asked this question. From a genetic standpoint, what is the estimated number of Mexican wolves required for a viable, permanent, sustainable population? And since then, I've got an answer for that. After talking to several veterinarians and several people at Northern Arizona University in genetics, that number will have to be in the range, a minimum, of 2,100 to 2,500 wolves in order for them to be sustainable. That is also depending on the dispersal area. It also depends on the prey population and movement. Ladies and gentlemen, this equals 36,000 prey. There are elk, deer, and antelope being removed from our prey base each and every year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Could you please spell your last name for the record?
Watson, W-A-T-S-O-N.
Thank you.
My name is Gail Griffin. I'm a state senator representing District Southeastern Arizona, District 14, which includes a large portion of the area that is subject to the new wolf release under the U.S. Fish and Wildlife's proposed rule. Hundreds of people have contacted me in opposition to the proposed rule. It is a great alarm that I stand here tonight to express my opposition to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife proposal to dramatically expand the Mexican wolf recovery program. In October, I held a public meeting in Greenlee County and did what no U.S. Fish and Wildlife employee has done for years. I talked to the people in Greenlee County. My seatmates and I sat for 3 hours as dozens of Greenlee County residents testified about the close encounters they've had with the Mexican wolves, about how they lost cattle to Mexican wolves, and how they have lost money and countless hours of time, not to mention mental and emotional anguish to these Mexican wolves. It's easy for you sitting in Albuquerque or Washington, D.C. to look at a map and see northern Greenlee County as an open and wild country where wolves can roam freely. But there's something Fish and Wildlife has chosen to ignore. There are people there. There are families there. And yes, there are children there, all of whom are being put at risk for federal government's release of wild predatory animals whose instinct is to kill. From the beginning, U.S. Fish and Wildlife wolf recovery system has been fundamentally flawed as it relied on faulty science, inadequate communication and coordination with the affected stakeholders, and a misguided premise that puts its interest of dangerous predators ahead of public interest as well as the public safety. It's difficult to understand why the U.S. Fish and Wildlife is considering an expansion of the Mexican wolf when it is clear that it is formed on faulty data from the beginning. We urge the service to withdraw the proposed rule and follow the rules and regulations. 10J regulations require the service to work with the state, tribal officers.
Next
and
speaker,
others.
please. Thank you.
Evening. Senator Judy Burgess, District 22, JUDY-BURGES. I appear before you to express my concern with the reintroduction as well expanding the territory of the Mexican gray wolf into counties in Arizona. While reintroduction of a predator species may be an exciting endeavor, there are inherent risks to citizens, pets, livestock, and the ranching business, and to wildlife in general. Furthermore, the gray wolf is known to carry a disease known as zoonotic. Colorado State University has accomplished multiple lab tests on wolves and discovered they have been infected with a dangerous tapeworm, and these worms are carrying Huddock cyst disease, which transfer to elk and other wildlife by wolf feces. Wolves in Idaho are also showing this disease. Why should the good citizens of Arizona find themselves in the same serious predicament, which could cost millions of dollars in lost wildlife and domestic livestock, as well as danger to humans, and then add the tremendous adverse economic conditions to this will bring? Surely, each of you has a moral compass that will not allow such a travesty to occur. Articles have been distributed as to the wolf's shyness and how these predators are benign. But academic evaluation written by Valeris Est brings to light another side to this cunning predator, that wolves are smart enough to test potential prey, to find weakness, and exploit it. The tameness and hanging around used to describe wolves are really ways for wolves to explore potential targets of opportunity, including citizens. Retired U.S. Fish and Wildlife biologist Jim Beers researched this behavior and exposed the lie. Wildlife biologist further states, distortions of the evidence to exonerate the wolves may serve the larger aim of the feds who want the gray wolf to remain on the Endangered Species Registry.
Thank you, Senator Burgess. Next speaker, please.
My name is Barry, B-A-R-R-Y, Weller, W-E-L-L-E-R. I am the District 3 Supervisor for Apache County, Arizona. I also have been given the permission to speak for Bucky, B-U-C-K-Y, Allred, A-L-L-R-E-D, who is the County Commissioner in Catron County, New Mexico. Director Tuggle, Ms. Barrett, I draw your attention to the fact that Apache County and Catron County, New Mexico, Apache County, Arizona, are the two most severely impacted counties within the Mexican gray wolf. I'd like you to listen in that light. All of the introduction has been done pretty much in Greeley County, but your own published maps by the IFT Interagency Field Team shows that all those bins that are now parked in Apache County and Catron County. So the impact is in our counties, and I'm asking you to listen in that light. Before I go into minimal detail with that, I'd like to draw your attention to a letter, November 13, 2013, written to the Honorable Dan Ash, Director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, from over 70 congressional members of our United States Congress, signed by them. And I'd like to suggest that you take that as my general comment to say that Apache County fully supports the delisting of the gray wolf. And there's much detail to that, and we agree with all the facts and issues that are associated in there, so I don't have to go into those details. This same document suggests that you do not continue with the process of the Mexican wolf until the process is better understood. They did not go into great detail, but I will bring to the issue. I've attended the earlier meeting, and there is obviously great controversy and polarization of this issue. And some of that comes about to questionable genetics, questionable population target shortfall, questionable mitigation limitations, questionable compensation.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Ron Campbell, C-A-M-P-B-E-L-L. Greenlee County Supervisor representing District 2, which is home to the Blue Range Wolf Recovery Area. We want to thank you for scheduling this hearing. It provides a forum for the local residents that are heavily impacted by the program and the proposals to express their views. Greenlee County has been on the forefront of the reintroduction program for the last 3 decades. At times, we have been the only county at the table, and we have stayed active as a member of IMAG, OMARC, and the MMT to make sure our residents, our ranching community in particular, have a voice. This hearing is conducted so that U.S. Fish and Wildlife gains comment on their proposals to delist the gray wolf, maintains protections for the Mexican gray wolf, as well as revisions to the non-essential experimental population rule for the Mexican gray wolf. However, the time frame set by the service have been expedited to the point of making it almost impossible for anyone to be able to gather all the information so that they can make informed comments. Along with that, important documents that would be beneficial have not been made public, such as a draft recovery plan or a draft Mexican wolf management plan. Without these documents, it severely limits the ability to evaluate the proposals. The approach taken has forced counties, agencies, tribes, and the public into unacceptably brief comment periods on such critical issues. We also do not believe that the service has fully evaluated or disclosed all reasonable listing alternatives to the proposed actions. Until such time, we feel the service should administratively relist the Mexican gray as experimental to maintain the protections as they have the authority to do so. The relist should also state that the wild wolf occurring in Arizona and New Mexico outside the current non-essential experimental population area should be considered an unlisted gray wolf. We also believe that the United States Fish and Wildlife has not adhered to NEPA regulations in their own policies regarding NEPA compliance and forwarding this proposal to revise the 1998 final rule. We request that the rule be retained without substantial modification.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
My name is Sandy Barr, S-A-N-D-Y-B-A-H-R, and I have a letter to read from Representative Chad Campbell. He's Minority Leader for the Arizona House of Representatives, representing Legislative District 24. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on the important issue of truly recovering the Mexican gray wolf in the Southwest. It is unfortunate that despite the mandates of the Endangered Species Act, recommendations from scientists, and strong support from the public, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service continues to manage Mexican gray wolves to the detriment of their recovery. That must stop, and true recovery of this endangered animal must begin. The Mexican gray wolf is the most genetically unique and most imperiled subspecies of gray wolf in North America, with only 3 breeding pairs and 75 total wolves in the wild this year. Mexican wolves are endangered by inbreeding, which affects their reproduction, as well as by government shooting and trapping, and by the restrictive boundaries established currently. While I have significant concerns about many of the proposals from U.S. Fish and Wildlife relative to Mexican gray wolves, I do support the changes in the proposed rule that would expand the area where wolves can roam and allow wolves to be released directly into the Gila National Forest of New Mexico, and to bring more diverse genes into the population. I cannot support the other proposals which will hinder the recovery of this highly endangered animal, however. Mexican gray wolves need the strong protections that the Endangered Species Act provides, so the designation of experimental non-essential should be removed. With so few wolves in the wild, with such a strong need to maintain and foster genetic diversity in these wolves, they are absolutely essential. Also, establishing additional wolf boundaries is also inappropriate. As a native Arizonan, someone who has served our state as an elected official, and as someone who has spent time enjoying the lands where you can now hear the howl, see the paw print, or on a lucky day catch a glimpse of a wolf, I urge the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to step up and take full responsibility to do everything to ensure recovery.
Thank you.
I'm Larry Boyles. I'm Director of the Arizona Game and Fish Department. My last name is spelled V as in Victor, O-Y-L-E-S. First, we will be providing in-depth written comment, so these will be abbreviated comments right now. First of all, I'd like to thank the Fish and Wildlife Service for holding this hearing here in the Mexican wolf recovery area. Our department and commission were deeply troubled by the initial announcement of public hearings in Washington, D.C., Albuquerque, and Sacramento, California, but no meetings here, and we're among the first to request those meetings. And I really sincerely want to thank you, Dr. Tuggle and Sherry Barrett, for
your role in ensuring that we had hearings within the Mexican wolf recovery area where the people live will be most affected by Mexican wolf recovery. The Mexican wolves that exist in the wild today, in total, every one of them, exist in the wild because of a 10-J rule that was, in fact, the result of a long negotiated effort and agreement between the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the affected states and stakeholders, setting forth the rules by which you could balance the needs of Mexican wolf and recovery with those of the people that live on the landscape and the other natural resources that are affected. 75 wolves on the landscape now, 50% increase in the last 3 years, virtually all of which are wild-born wolves. That's far from being a failure. In fact, it's on the road to success. And that's solely due to the use of the 10-J rule as a mechanism to gain those kinds of public support. Those of us who sat through the meeting earlier, the information session, listened to the questions from all sides of the aisle, were very much aware, painfully aware, if you will.
Thank you, sir.
Of the
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Thank you for your work.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Terry Wheeler. I'm Terrywheeler. I'm currently the mayor of Globe. We want to comment on the delisting of the gray wolf, which we agree is appropriate. Both the gray wolf and the Mexican wolf must be delisted as T&E species and put under the management of the appropriate state game and fish agencies. Globe is a city in east central Arizona, the county seat of Gila County. We are a unique little city founded in the 1870s on mining and ranching, which is very important to our economic base today. Business diversification, outdoor recreation, tourism, higher education opportunities are some of the additions to our economic structure that are allowing us to move forward. The expansion of the Mexican wolf populations in the Gila County, and that's Tonto Basin, will put all of Gila County, including Globe, at the forefront of wolf expansion. Wolf expansion will exacerbate livestock and wildlife depredation, as well as add harm to the health and welfare of our citizens. It will destroy our outdoor recreation and tourism program that are essential to our economic base future development. The sad truth is that the wolves are already here. I ranch north of Globe, and we have seen and followed their tracks while riding on the ranch. Recently, a collared wolf was seen in Payson. Wolves released in Gila County will be in Scottsdale in a real near future, munching down on pink Pomeranians, pampered polo horses, or kids chasing soccer balls. Think it can happen? Talk to the residents of Reserve, New Mexico. Reserve was a bustling, vibrant community until the endangered species put them out of business, the spotted owl and then the wolf. And if you don't think it can happen to them, it will happen to the rest of us just as well. Please, for the sake of our people, our families, our towns, our resources,
Thank you, sir.
Do not release any
Thank you,
more
sir.
wolves.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Mike Noel, N-O-E-L, just like Christmas. Merry Christmas to everybody. I'm from southern Utah. I represent Rural District 73, which contains 8 rural counties. It's the largest rural district in the state of Utah. I'm here today because I'm worried about the people in this area down here and the fact that maybe these wolves might end up in my district. In my district, we've had many species listed: the Mexican spotted owl, the Kanab amber snail, wound-fin minnow, the goshawk, the Welch's milkweed, Utah prairie dog, the Gunnis the sage grouse, and the coral pink sand dunes tiger beetle, which is going to shut down one of our best parks down there, the Sand Dunes State Park. Let me just tell you this, and this is to Dr. Tuggle. I appreciate you being here today. You had these hearings in Albuquerque, and you had them in Colorado, and Denver, and you had them in Sacramento and Washington, D.C., but this is where the impacts are going to be, right here in this area. You've already impacted citizens in southern Utah. You've already impacted in Arizona. I'm here to tell you it cost thousands of jobs. People are upset. People are angry. I'm a cattleman. These animals will go out and they will kill cattle. We've already seen them. We had a gentleman here that lost thousands and thousands of dollars. At $1,000 a head for a calf, how much can we pay for it? You have got a population now in my district and throughout the state that are very angry with what's going on. They're angry at the federal government. They're angry at the Fish and Wildlife Service because we want the state, we want the people of our state to manage the resources in our state and not someone in D.C. and not someone in other states. We want it done here right in our area. That's what has to happen.
I would ask that you pause for a cheer. Please respect everyone.
My name is Tommy Martin. I'm a Gila County Board of Supervisor from Payson. I want to thank you very much for bringing this hearing to us. It's important to me that you did that, and I very much appreciate it. My position isn't, are we going to have a wolf or not? It is, how are we going to have this wolf? And I would like to weigh in on, we need the 10J rule. We need it strengthened. I'd like to see us, in fact, instead of having a corridor between I-40 and I-10, have it border to border. It makes no sense to me for a wolf to go across I-40 to Den, and suddenly it's an entirely different situation than it was on the other side of the road. I would like to see us be able to manage that critter. Is why I think we need to have a 10J rule. Whether or not it's removed, relocate it, or be able to kill it. There's times that that's going to be necessary, I think. I do not want to see them released in Gila County. I don't want to see them released on the Tana Forest. I think they need to continue to be released where they are. And by the time they get to us, they're more of a wolf than a dog. And I think that's important too. I'll have people say that we have lots of wilderness areas throughout Arizona. We have some postage stamp wilderness areas that a man can walk across in a day. A wolf certainly could. We have a lot of vacant land, but we're not talking like the Frank Church River of No Return wilderness. And that needs to be taken into consideration as to where we release them and how they react and act when they get there. And that's all I have. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
My name is Leland Hogan, Lelandhogan. I'm president of the Utah Farm Bureau Federation, and our organization has 29,000 member families in Utah. And I also represent policy from the American Farm Bureau Federation that has 6 million members across the United States. Agriculture and food contributes more than $17 billion to the Utah economy, or more than 14% of the state's GDP. Agriculture and food is the foundation for 80,000 jobs and $2.7 billion in wages. More than 70% of Utah's farm gate sales come from the livestock sector, with cattle and calves being the largest contributor. Cattle and sheep operators are the major contributors to Utah's rural economy and community tax structure. Disruption of the normal behavior of livestock by wolves has the impact not only by loss of life, but it also affects weight gain and reproduction. The Utah Farm Bureau and the American Farm Bureau support the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service proposal to remove the gray wolf from the list of threatened and endangered species. However, we do not support the proposal to maintain endangered status for the Mexican wolf. There is no provision in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service recovery plans that deem Utah as essential to the recovery of either the gray wolf or the Mexican wolf. Any wolves, either gray wolf or Mexican wolf, that makes its way into Utah should fall under the management of the state of Utah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
James Goughnour, Goughnour.
Here we go.
Mexican gray wolves were introduced in Arizona by an act of Congress in 1997. At that time, the law designated a certain area and a certain number of wolves, about 100, to be established. Today, we're near that goal with 75 to 85 wild wolves and a couple of hundred in captivity that could be released. So logic and the law would say that it's time to call the program a success and end it. However, now the Fish and Wildlife Service wants to expand the range and have an unlimited number of wolves. The creation of a new subspecies of wolves is not supported by scientific data, nor is the expansion of this program supported by the people who will most directly be impacted by it. I also want to refer to this letter from the U.S. Congress that was signed by 75 House of Representatives and Senators. And what was unique is a lot of the people that signed it, like Senator Orra Hatch from Utah and Michelle Bachmann, all have experience with this. They know where this program is headed, and they signed that letter. So I'd ask you, if you haven't seen that letter, I have a copy of it here, and you can surely read that. Let me just take one paragraph from that letter. The full delisting of the gray wolf is long overdue. Since wolves were first provided protection under the ESA, uncontrolled and unmanaged growth of wolf populations has resulted in devastating impacts on hunting, ranching, and tragic damages to historical strong elk herds, moose, big horn sheep, and mule deer. This is why we believe it's critical that you reconsider your decision to list the Mexican gray wolf as a subspecies under the ESA, which would have a severe impact to private landowners, including ranchers in Arizona, New Mexico, and surrounding states.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Dulcie Bhaktivedanta, DASI-BHAKTI-VEDANGA. I feel like the differences that I've heard in opinions today are due to some of us hold anthropocentric viewpoints and some of us do not. And so I want to...
Could you please speak up just a little bit?
Okay, some of us hold anthropocentric viewpoints, that humans are the center, and some of us do not. Some of us hold the viewpoint that humans are a part of a greater whole. And I fall in the latter category, but I understand and I have people in my life that I love that hold the other viewpoint. So I just hope that we can find some common ground by not seeing each other as enemies, but as, talk and hear each other's viewpoints. And I'm honored to have been here today to hear viewpoints from both sides. My problem is that where we have seen the wolves delisted, we've seen wholesale slaughter. So after so much investment in the wolves being brought back from the brink of extinction to when they've been left to the whims of the states, they're just being slaughtered almost for fun in many cases. And so I think we can do better in that. We can find a way around that. Human beings, I believe, are not the center of nature. We're part of a larger picture of life. And it's the human species whose behavior has thrown the balance of nature off. Our actions have caused many species to extinction or to the brink of extinction. When the balance is thrown off, we all suffer, including humanity. And so I think that's all I have to say. I'm very nervous and I'm sorry. And I thank everyone for coming out here and just showing their support to whatever side they hold dear. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Leslie Johnson, LESLIEJOHNSON. My husband owns the Flying H Ranch. We bordered the White Mountain Apache Indian Reservation for 37 miles. It takes us 3 hours to drive that 37 miles. You never get out of second gear. But as we're driving along, we do see camps, we do see people. So there are people out there. We are right in the center of where you're proposing to expand your non-essential population area. So we are definitely opposed to it. It takes us 45 days to gather all our cows, to brand, vaccinate, so on. So I don't see where we're going to find wolf kills to be compensated from a compensation program that is basically non-existent at this point. We know people that had ranches in the blue, the wolves put them out of business, and that one of them's our game warden now. I believe that the wolves should be expanded or put where their native area is. I have many historical books that talk about hunting in our area. There were grizzly bears, mountain lions, regular bears, coyotes, bobcats. Not one mention of a wolf anywhere. So our area is not a historical area for that for wolves. So they should not be reintroduced there. To me, the wolf reintroduction in our area is the same as having a convicted felon who's a murderer move to your neighborhood and the government pay for their housing and their food. It's the same thing. My husband is one of these people that thinks outside of the box. He says, why don't they just buy a ranch, put a fence around it, let the wolves exist there, let them breed there, let them live there. If somebody wants to go hear them howl, let them camp there. Why do they have to put them where we have families, where we're making our livelihood?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Danny Giovanni. It's Giovale. I'm from Flagstaff, and I am a business owner. I don't ranch cattle, but I actually make outdoor equipment. So I manufacture and design equipment for people to hike in the outdoors and go in the backcountry. I'm here to share my view that the wolf recovery area should in fact be expanded. I-40 is right through Flagstaff, and for us to fill that border for the expansion is very awkward to be right on that borderline. We're enthusiastic, many of us in the outdoor community, to have wolves north of I-40 as well as south of I-40, and so I'm following on that kind of outer cusp here. And it was nice to hear earlier in the informational session that the border seemed more like a potentially temporary thing, that more wolves would eventually need to be introduced north of I-40. And I heard that in an earlier informational thing from Ms. Barrett, and that was encouraging. So I'm here to encourage that, and definitely not having the non-essential specification on the listing. And I believe the best science from what I've been able to get from the conservation community does promote wolves for the health of our elk and wildlife in the Flagstaff area. So I would like to promote that idea, and that's all I have. Thank you.
I wish we could have had hearings in Salt Lake and other parts of the West, but regardless, I'm here. We need a robust population of Mexican wolves in the Blue Ridge Wolf Recovery area. We need to have more direct releases. We need to move wolves out of captivity into the wild population. We need to allow wolves to migrate back to Utah. Wolves are native to Utah. You heard from Utah politicians earlier. They do not represent Utah public opinion. Utah public opinion supports wolves. Don't take my word for it. Read the State of Utah Wolf Management Plan. It will tell you the statistics in there. Utah and Colorado need wolf populations in order to keep the metapopulation of wolves genetically healthy and for long-term viability. Aspen stands in Utah and other states in the interior west are in decline because of the lack of predators to keep elk on the move. Wolves will help the landscape in Utah as well as other western states. Please follow the ESA. Please follow the law. Use the best science. Have wolf populations in southern Colorado and southern Utah.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Jim Warren, W-A-R-R-E-N. I'm here representing the National Wild Turkey Federation, the Arizona chapter thereof. Thank you very much for hosting this. This is great. Get all sides exposed here, and it's important that in a democracy everybody gets to be heard. The Turkey Federation, National Wild Turkey Federation, has over 228,000 members nationwide. It's a big organization. And we have over 1,200 in Arizona, so we carry some impact. We're not against the listing of the Mexican gray wolf. We're adamantly against the further expansion of packs into new areas. A number of these proposed areas have never in modern history held such species, and they should not be introduced now, supposedly to enhance the recovery from an endangered list. There's a reason the name Mexican is used in describing the species. They originally inhabited Mexico and southern Arizona, not Colorado, not central and northern Arizona, nor northern New Mexico. The service originally established a limited recovery area and population goal. While that goal has not been formally reached, the territory of the packs has expanded well beyond the original areas. Wolf sightings have been reported in some communities along the Mogollon Rim, far and away from their intended recovery range. We don't need more individuals and packs in those areas. We would remind the service to consider the probable impact of a greatly expanded recovery territory upon other species, some under consideration for listing as endangered. As an example, we are intimately acquainted with the Turkey Federation spent the last 20 years restoring the once extirpated Goughnour turkey in southern Arizona. Today, people in that part of the state are thrilled to see the majestic bird in mountain ranges. How long will it be before the Mexican gray wolf develops a taste for the Goughnour turkey? You need to recognize the impact of the local population on ranchers, outdoorsmen, and others. They're hunting, they're doing protecting food children at bus stops over in reserve. Is this a zoo in reverse? Do we put citizenry in cages?
Thank you, sir.
So animals can run free?
Thank you. Next speaker.
Yeah, my name is Kim Crumbo. That's K-I-M-C-R-U-M-B-O. I would kid you about that. I'm a native Utahn, but I've lived for 30 years in northern Arizona, Grand Canyon National Park. I'm the father of 2 grown boys now. We had raised them in Grand Canyon in a small community in a park with abundant wildlife, including coyotes and bobcats and cougars, and really only had a little bit of problem smell. But they grew up and learned how to live with wildlife constantly in their backyards and things, so I know you can do that. I support the utilization of the best available science in this whole process. I oppose delisting of the gray wolf nationwide simply because I'd like to see wolves in some of these states, Utah, where I live now, and also because it is also supported by the best available science that those animals play an important ecological role, as well as provide quite a bit of wonderful experiential opportunities. I support listing the Mexican wolf as an endangered subspecies, but I oppose the non-essential experimental label. I think at the very least that should be essential experimental populations. I suggest, actually support eliminating the whole concept of the Mexican wolf experimental population area. I think that wolves should be allowed to inhabit areas that are suitable for their population growth. And certainly the Mexican wolf recovery team, the science and planning subgroup, make those recommendations that you have at least 3 connected populations of wolves. And those include areas north of the interstate. Those are essential for effective recovery of the Mexican wolf subspecies. And thank you for allowing us to speak.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I'm Billy Hughes, H-U-G-H-E-S. I'm the 2nd generation Arizonan, my son 3rd, my grandson 4th. I have come to the White Mountains since the late 40s, early 50s. We lived in Tucson. My father worked for the Arizona Air National Guard, and his sanity was to be able to come to the wild country and enjoy hunting and fishing and just being outdoors. I was lucky enough a few years ago to go with my sister, and we happened to hit Double Cienega, not looking for wolves, but we heard them howl, and that was transformation. My mother and father never heard a wolf howl. My son has not, and my grandson has not. And I hope I don't leave a world for them where there are no wolves howling. I'm in Nutrioso, Arizona. I represent the White Mountain Conservation League and Great Oak Broadsboro Wilderness. I border the Forest Service. We have had wolves come close. I've never been lucky enough to see one, but I have found sign. I welcome them. I have dogs. I take care of them. I do not support the delisting of the wolf nationwide. I do support essential status, protected status for the Mexican gray wolf. I do not support limiting their habitat. They need to be able to move. We need to be able to put these into the Gila, into all of the different areas, and return this animal to its role in protecting our environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Gene Osorio. That's spelled Jeanossoorio. I come to this hearing today having just spent my 340th and 341st nights tent camping in the home range of the Mexican wolf pack, in this case the Elkhorn pack. In this season, when it's a tradition to express gratitude, I am deeply thankful that the Mexican wolf, missing from this land for over 50 years, has returned. Once more, Lobo pups stumble from the mouths of rocky dens to greet the sun. I've seen half-grown pups tumbling in snowdrifts and secluded meadows. Older ones learn from their elders how to be wolves, tracking and killing elk, forming packs, and producing the next generation of Lobos. All is not well with our Lobos, however. Scientists tell us that more releases are necessary to genetically rescue a population in jeopardy from inbreeding depression. At least 2 more wild populations with some genetic exchange between them are necessary for long-term survival and recovery. The ideal places, they say, are the Grand Canyon region and the Southern Rockies, northern New Mexico and southern Colorado. This proposed rule would effectively prevent wolves from reaching those areas against the recommendations of the science panel of the current recovery team. Please amend the proposal, allowing wolves to move freely across human-designated boundary lines. If formal boundaries are needed to define the experimental population area, let them be Interstate 70 on the north and the Mexican border on the south. Please complete the recovery plan, complete this EIS, and get on with more releases. Thank you. And thanks to the White Mountain Apache tribe for hosting this meeting and hosting packs of Lobos on their tribal land.
Hi, my name is Mike Edwards, EDWARDS. I'm not an expert, but I've been to school and I remember my classes. I know Mother Nature keeps a harmony in nature. For thousands and thousands of years, our ecosystem has been healthy. It's only the introduction of humans that have destroyed our ecology and decimated the wolf population. I'm here to support the wolves. I believe they should be released in the wild. I believe the borders should be taken away and let Mother Nature determine where the wolves should roam and habitat. I understand the ranchers' financial losses because of wolves, and I believe the federal government should reimburse the ranchers for their financial losses so that they don't take it out on the wolves. Let the wolves be in the wild, let them find where they need to live by themselves. Thank you.
And missing was the bald eagle. I can also remember what a thrill to see this marvelous bird flying once again over the mountains in our beautiful deserts. I think this was only because keeping it on the endangered list gave the eagle time to get reestablished in its native habitats, and now this magnificent creature flies throughout our country. I think of my granddaughter, who already will not see the ivory-billed woodpecker, extinct in 1994, the Mexican grizzly 1964, and the western black rhinoceros in 2011. I hope that the Mexican gray wolf will not be in that category, but I truly fear, backed by many scientific studies, that unless the Mexican gray wolf is kept on the endangered list, we will soon be seeing the last one, then none. Time magazine recently had the picture of a deer on the cover with the word pest. Until we humans once again learn to respect and honor other living creatures on our planet, this dying out of species will continue. Can we really afford to keep upsetting the ecosystem because of short-sightedness and sheer selfishness? It is our choice. Will my granddaughter learn about the Mexican gray wolf only from a textbook or hiking at our beautiful Arizona mountains? I hope it's through the hike. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
We will be submitting written comments from 17 chapters in the state today. We have signatures from 600 chapter leaders on those 17 letters. There is strong statewide support for ensuring that there are safeguards to protect our wildlife. I think the cautionary tale that comes from the Northern Rockies is not whether the wolf as a species is good or bad. That's not really the question. The question is one of management. and whether we should be able, whether states, whether local communities should be able to protect indigenous wildlife populations. For the last 100 years, sportsmen and livestock producers have been strong proponents of multi-species conservation. We understand that we need to invest in our wildlife populations, elk, deer, and other species on the landscape are largely there as a result of the investment by sportsmen in those communities. We feel strongly that this investment needs to be protected, and the best way to do that is to ensure that states have management authority to address unsustainable predation as it arises. State governments are fully qualified to responsibly manage wolf populations and are best able to meet the needs of local communities and wildlife populations. We also strongly feel, as has been stated repeatedly, that the mandates of the Endangered Species Act should not force populations outside of historic range. This is a dangerous precedent, both from a legal and a biological perspective. I will submit the rest of my written comments for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Recovery area. This has been recommended by experts for more than a decade and has a sound basis in science and in the law. This change is essential to ensure the genetic integrity of the animals as well as their ultimate recovery. Sierra Club has never supported the non-essential experimental status of these animals, as the wild population is essential to the recovery of the species. That has become clearer than ever over the last 15 years. The non-essential designation is likely to appreciably reduce the likelihood of recovery of Mexican wolves in the wild. Sierra Club supports the provision in the proposed rule to allow Mexican wolves to disperse naturally from the Blue Range Wolf Recovery Area and into the Mexican wolf experimental population area, and to occupy area without the requirement to bring them back. We also support the proposal to move the southern boundary in Arizona and New Mexico from Highway 10 to the U.S.-Mexico border. The service proposal to allow wolves to disperse no farther north than I-40 is contrary to recommendations from scientists and the service's own Mexican wolf recovery team. We look forward to the day when the Mexican gray wolf is fully recovered throughout its range and is fulfilling its essential ecological role throughout the southwestern landscape. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
My name is Roxanne George, Roxanegeorge. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I also want to thank the White Mountain Apache tribe for sharing their land with wolves. Their willingness to do that exemplifies good stewardship. I live in Flagstaff, Arizona. I hike and camp on the lands that are part of the Blue Range Wolf Recovery Area and on lands that are within the expanded area proposed. Giving critically endangered Mexican gray wolves Endangered Species Act protections in their own right is long overdue, and I strongly support that proposal, but not in the context of stripping protections for gray wolves. I, like most Arizonans, welcome the return of Mexican wolves and want to see them thrive. They have been missing for too long, and many of us seem to forget that we do not restore endangered species for their benefit, but for ours. Mexican wolves are a good example of that. We in our public land stand to benefit tremendously from restoring wolves to their natural role. Our local economies stand to benefit enormously as well. Wolves have contributed over $35 million a year to the Yellowstone region and can bring significant new revenues to rural Arizona communities. Unfortunately, very little in the proposed changes to the rule will move recovery forward. I support expanding the area where wolves can roam and allowing initial releases throughout the Blue Range, but the rest of the proposal, including boundaries on the wolves' movements and loosened restrictions on take, should be discarded as inconsistent with recovery. It will be a great tragedy if we lose these important native animals from the wild a second time because you sacrificed your mandate to recover endangered species to political considerations. Thank you.
Thank you.
It is hard hard to be a first-generation rancher. This is our very first year, and this program jeopardizes everything that we have just put in and everything that we're hoping for our family. I want to start by saying I do support the delisting of the gray wolf, and I also support the delisting of the Mexican gray wolf. Part of the ESA criteria for ESA states that it must be a valid subspecies, and scientists do not agree. It is not agreeable that it is indeed a subspecies, and it's something that needs to be addressed. I also want to say that cattle ranching is not just about producing meat for people, although it is a high quality protein meal for people. One yearling calf taken by a wolf would supply over 1,400 people with that quality protein meal. So if you take into consideration the 400 cattle already killed on the Blue Range, that is a quality protein meal for 572,000 people. Those are major impacts, and not even talking about the byproducts from those animals. So you might not eat meat, but I'm sure you drive a car. I'm sure you utilize things that come in plastics. I'm sure you drive on roads. All these byproducts are important to our everyday lives, including medications. There are so many things to be taken into consideration when talking about the impacts just to cattle ranching, let alone the population as a whole. These areas that you're talking about are highly human populated. They are one of the most popular recreation sites in our state, and they're going to impact people.
I'm going to call Dennis Pirch, Payson Penguin, IRCH, Payson, Arizona. 42 years, a public high school teacher, and still in that business. I have a pretty good understanding of the folks at Payson, having educated 3 generations. I might add that I had the opportunity to go to a meeting created by the Arizona Game and Fish Department in Star Valley, where over 200 Paysonites showed up. And I might add, of the 200 that showed up, I think it was overwhelmingly, they were concerned and did not want the reintroduction of the Mexican gray wolf, or introduction of the Mexican gray wolf into the Goughnour National Forest. Now, I do want to make sure you understand, of the 200 plus that were there were 2 people in support. One was a member of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, I believe. Her friend said, I have no dog in the fight, so I won't take a stand. And the third person was a paid lobbyist from the Sierra Club. So I want to make sure you understand that that was one element, one group that I attended. There was another meeting that I showed up at, that there was about 150 members of the community, a totally different, diverse group. They were overwhelmingly against the introduction of the Mexican gray wolf to Gila County, to the Payson area. I went to a third meeting where there was about 100. There were a couple that were in favor, but again, the great majority. So I think I'm speaking for the folks in Payson. I think I'm speaking of the folks in Goughnour National Forest that are totally surrounded, that we have a question. And the question is, do the local folks in the National Forest want the wolf? And I have to say the bottom line is, no, we do not want it in Payson nor in Gila County. And thank you for your time, and thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is J.S. Smith. I'm a rancher from Gila County. I've been a senior guide here on the res. Been here for 35 years. 2 minutes would not be enough time for me to tell you all the field experience that I've had with your wolves. This program has been classic federal overreach. An historic observation would be that when tyranny is imposed on the populace, sometimes civil disobedience, I suggest you take your wolves and turn them loose on the Potomac River.